the one at the center of this story, have sought to block their previous lethal injections by saying they would prefer to be executed by nitrogen hypoxia. But on the other side of this, you have many opponents arguing this basically amounts to human experimentation. But here's the deal. Given the fact that Alabama has already officially signaled that it is ready to go ahead with this execution method, it's all but ensured to set off lengthy legal battles, which arguably could have been the inmate's intent all along. But it could very well change how he and future death row inmates are killed in the future. But for now, like this inmate, we're gonna have to wait to see how things play out, though arguably the stakes are lower for us. And then you've got this massive growing health crisis in America, but not enough people are talking about it, right? Because you have temperatures all over the country hitting record highs this summer, and now you have kids heading back to school in still sweltering conditions. But here's a huge thing. Tons of schools nationwide lack proper cooling systems or don't even have any air conditioning at all. In fact, a federal report from 2020 estimated that out of 100,000 K-12 public schools in America, around 36,000 of them need updated heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems. We're talking about more than a third of all public schools. And the situation has only been getting worse with climate change. For example, a 2021 study found that 13,700 public schools that didn't need cooling systems in 1970 will need them by 2025. Because public schools built before or during the 70s weren't designed for historic extreme heat. And understand, this isn't a problem just in typically hot parts of the country. In fact, experts say that one of the major issues here is that schools in cool weather climates are now the most ill-prepared. I mean, some of these buildings we're talking about were specifically built to retain heat, which is why you have education leaders and experts warning that failing to modernize these systems actively harms staff and students and even put them in danger. Or we've seen schools reporting serious heat-related illnesses like heat stroke on hot days, and multiple public health studies finding that as the prevalence of high temperatures increase, so will heat-related illness at school. But the impact of inadequate heating systems extends beyond just the infrastructure in school buildings. Right, for example, on the very first day of the school year in Des Moines, Iowa, temperatures hit a record 100 degrees. But just 5 of the 130 school buses in the district actually have AC, which made not only for just an absolutely horrible ride for tons of kids, but also resulted in 15 drivers being treated for signs of heat exhaustion. But also beyond that, the lack of proper cooling undermines the entire point of school. It's incredibly disruptive to learning, and that's actually backed up by science, with a series of studies finding that extreme temperatures increase absenteeism and student disciplinary referrals. You also have students scoring increasingly lower on standardized tests for each day when the temperature was above 80 degrees. And you even have a Harvard research paper from a few years back identifying a direct correlation between rising temperatures and decreased learning outcomes in schools without air conditioning. Right? Researchers finding that when a school is just 1 degree hotter, it reduces learning over that entire year by 1%. And that notably also disproportionately impacting Black, Hispanic, and low-income students, with a paper estimating that heat accounted for as much as 13% of the racial achievement gap in America. And I'm talking about this now because we're just a few weeks into the new school year and we're already seeing firsthand evidence of these heat-related disruptions. Right, last week we saw numerous school districts across the country being forced to modify their schedules because of lacking or non-existent cooling systems, with districts in Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, and so many others either closing down entirely or dismissing students early as millions of people were under excessive heat warnings. So clearly, this is an incredibly serious problem that is only getting worse, but there's not enough movement to actually fix it right now. And part of the reason for that is this problem is so widespread, and addressing it is insanely expensive. The 2021 infrastructure bill set aside $500 million to close the funding gap, but experts estimate that $38 billion is what's actually needed. Though in some places, funding isn't even the issue. For example, you have things like one teacher in Philly telling reporters that his school actually bought air conditioners a few years ago, but then the district told them, hey, you can't use that because those units are going to put too much strain on the grid. So they're just sitting in storage unused as you have kids suffering. And honestly, this shouldn't be a surprise because when infrastructure is not addressed, it does what it does. It slowly crumbles, right? You slowly catch up to that can you kick down the road. And I genuinely don't know if we're going to see actual solutions come from our government. And then longtime viewers note that I talk about my Vessies all the time, and it's because I love these go-to for anything shoes. So thank you to Vessi for being a great partner and sponsor of the PDS. And there are so many great styles and colors to choose from, but of equal importance, they're lightweight, waterproof, and snowproof, so you can enjoy a relaxing walk in any weather. I personally like the laceless look at the moment. That's why I'm still reaching for my boardwalk to move around without being restricted, and Vessi sneakers just look good. The low cut goes with almost any fit that you can think of, and with different colorways, you can pick the right look for yourself. But I also really want to give a shout out to the team at Vessi, helping to support programs to create fresh water where it's needed most around the world. But the main thing, go check out Vessi. They have a style for everyone, and you'll get 15% off your entire order when you go to vessi.com/PDS. That's vessi.com/PDS for 15% off right now. And then when you think of 3M, what comes to mind? For me personally, I think of either like picture hanging strips or like masks, but they are an absolutely massive conglomerate with their fingers in everything. And they've actually been on the receiving end of hundreds of thousands of lawsuits by military veterans over their earplugs, which those vets said failed to protect them from hearing loss during their military service. Now, the cases date back to 2016 with a whistleblower lawsuit filed on behalf of the U.S. government, and it it is one of the biggest mass torts in history, meaning that it is one of the largest groups of people who were all harmed by the same thing. These plaintiffs saying the earplugs were faulty and many were left with hearing loss and tinnitus. And all of it leading to the big news today, a $6 billion settlement. And the plaintiff's attorneys saying in a statement, this historic agreement represents a tremendous victory for the thousands of men and women who bravely served our country and returned home with life-altering hearing injuries. Though, of course, because we are talking about a rich as fuck company, the company agreed to the settlement without any admission of liability. Instead, saying their earplugs are, quote, safe and effective when used properly, and going on to say they are prepared to go to court if certain terms in the settlement aren't met. However, we'll also see what happens because some analysts suggest that the litigation could cost the company between $10 and $15 billion. And notably, this isn't even the only multi-billion dollar legal settlement 3M has dealt with this year, with them back in June agreeing to pay over $10 billion over 13 years to fund the detection of forever chemicals in drinking water, with the plaintiffs in that case alleging that the company knew the chemicals in its products could cause a variety of health problems along with cancer, low fertility, and birth defects. But also, like with the earplug case, the company didn't have to admit liability in their settlement there either. Also, oddly, this is only the first of two noise-related stories today. And then, do you think that we should ban cashless businesses? Because right now, LA wants to ban them, because many places in LA have actually stopped accepting cash as a payment method, with a number of business owners saying it's just a more effective and safe way of doing business. Because they say that by accepting just plastic and digital payments, businesses can remove cash-related costs, things like storage and transport, as well as attempting to minimize the risks of break-ins by limiting the amount of cash that they have on hand. However, according to people like City Council member Heather Hutt of the 10th District, this practice is leaving many customers behind. And a recent motion to ban cashless businesses reading, not accepting cash payment in the marketplace systematically excludes segments of the population that are largely low-income people of color. With Hutt also going on to say that customers who are unbanked, elderly, or low income often rely on cash just to get by, and saying in order to ensure that all city residents, including those who lack access to other forms of payment, are able to participate in the city's economic life, we should adopt an ordinance that allows them to pay cash for goods and many services. And as far as how many people does this actually affect, a 2021 study estimated that 7% of California's population was unbanked, with nearly another 20% being underbanked, meaning they have irregular access to banking services. Very notably with this, LA wouldn't be the first to ban cashless businesses, with New York City, Philadelphia, San Francisco, and DC having all adopted similar ordinances and rules. Hell, even whole states like Massachusetts, Colorado, New Jersey, and Rhode Island have banned cashless businesses. But on the other side of this, you have people saying, why penalize a business for running it how they want to? But if a private business isn't a utility or an essential service, why does the government have to crack down on them? But for now, we'll have to wait to see what LA does. And in the meantime, I gotta ask you, do you think that we should ban cashless businesses? Yes or no? Why not? And then, Starfield has become one of the most anticipated video games in history. And so, of course, it has been surrounded by controversy and craziness. Starting with the fact that there's now leaked footage online that shows that a lot of the stuff that was promised doesn't appear to be there. With that leaked footage coming from a variety of sources, but possibly the dumbest one being from a guy who stole 67 copies of the game and recorded 45 minutes of it, and all of that landing him with some fun felony charges. Also, the specific details around that are kind of hilarious, because he not only stole them from a Memphis, Tennessee distributor, but he also sold copies on this site and then videoed himself shipping them out. Y'all, what is the #1 rule about committing crimes? 1, don't do it. But 2, if you do, don't videotape it. But as ridiculous as all that was, the big controversy now surrounds all the leaks that people are talking about. Because for the fans of the game, the belief that the developers lied is the biggest story. Right? I mean, you had one fan asking the developers, when I land on a planet, will I be able to explore the whole entire planet? And the response was a clear, yep, if you want, walk on, brave explorer. And so that, among many past promises, made players feel like it would be a seamless experience. But in one leaked video that I'm not going to show here, because I'm not fighting Bethesda on a copyright strike, it shows that a player eventually hits an invisible wall and is stopped. So you had a lot of fans that were pissed off, but also a number of fans feeling like people are overreacting. Right, a lot of people with legit early access to the game for reviews are posting vague messages stating that the leaks don't tell the whole story, with that leading to a lot of speculation that there are load screens or the worlds are set up in massive tiles, or things like you can see one area and then do a quick jump in your spaceship to the next tile of the world. But even those vague responses led Bethesda to remind reviewers that they need to keep quiet until the embargo is lifted. And with that, there are also people pointing out that even if there are some invisible walls, that's a minor problem, with the leaked footage appearing to show that it takes 40 minutes to reach the edge. And if you compare that to Fallout 4, their last popular title, it took 35 minutes to go across the entire playing space. So just based off of that, Starfield's already orders of magnitude bigger. But hey, as far as the reality of the situation is, personally, I'm waiting. It's one of the reasons 9 times out of 10, I'm not pre-ordering games, I'm waiting for reviews. But for my beautiful bastards out there who are gamers, I gotta know, what are your thoughts here? And then, the Chinese real estate market is taking a fucking beating right now, especially as Evergrande stock plummeted as much as 87% yesterday, which if you're unfamiliar with them, we've talked about them a few times on the show, but they are one of the largest developers in China, if not the world. And notably, when that drop happened, It was the first day that it was allowed to be traded in 17 months. And so it really wasn't surprising to see a drop like this, especially since last month Evergrande posted that between 2021 and 2022, it had a net loss of $113 billion. And it topped that shit Sunday with a very little cherry on top of roughly a $5 billion loss so far this year. And a really important thing to understand is that Evergrande's issues translate to more than just large creditors getting screwed. It also means that the company's having trouble raising cash that it could then use to finish its many unfinished projects. With China facing a major housing crunch in many parts of the country, these vacant, unfinished buildings not only mean fewer potential homes, but also more expensive projects if other developers want to either attempt to take them over or just start from scratch. But there is a small glimmer of hope for the company. It's a restructuring plan, because bondholders have 4 more weeks to look over these latest numbers and consider it. And I don't want us to get lost in the weeds into the specifics of the different types of bondholders, but they seem to be kind of split. One group overwhelmingly supports